Creeper, and today I'm back with a brand new Doctor Who Classic review. We're continuing on our journey through Season 12 of Classic Who. We started last week with Robot, the Fourth Doctor's very first story and adventure, and now we are talking about the Ark in Space. A fan favourite in some cases, and I believe it's my first Classic Who story that doesn't contain like a famous Doctor Who monster. Obviously the Wirren are, you know, famous because the Ark in Space is famous, but I mean one that hasn't sort of appeared in New Who. All the classic stories I've seen so far are probably either Cybermen, Dalek, or Sontaran stories, and that's kind of weird. So yes, here we are today with something a little bit unique, a little bit different. There's not too much to talk about today, but I thought I'd break it down in the same way as normal, talking about the story, the first half, the last half, characters, the best bits, and then my overall score out of 10. In terms of the story for this one, it's basically the Fourth Doctor, Sarah and Harry go on their first space adventure together, out away from Earth, away from the unit, away from the Brigadier, something a bit different. They come into conflict with some of the last surviving humans who've been left in stasis on the Nerva Beacon. So yeah, that's basically the story. It's very simple. There's a little bit of an alien infestation, but we'll get to that. The first half of the story is actually quite a fun Doctor Who space romp, especially episode 1 being mostly confined to one room, one very small set. It still makes it very entertaining and very watchable, watching the Doctor and Harry try and combat this sort of ceiling sentry gun while Sarah's like in and out of consciousness all the way through the first episode. It's actually quite fun. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. It keeps you entertained. It's, you know, it's nice conflict, obviously ending with the main TARDIS team going into the big stasis chamber, seeing all the bodies held up in stasis, and then Harry getting attacked by a dead Wirral. That was quite fun. So yeah, no, the first episode was basically just brilliant. It was fun, enjoyable, and the second episode wasn't too bad either. I mean, it was, you know, it wasn't as good as the first one, but it was good. It sets up the story basically like all of the classic Doctor Who stories do. The first half is there to set up the story for the interesting payoff, and it's all depending on how well the payoff works in terms of how well the story works. But the first half is always really interesting to me because it's actually, does the first half actually interest me beyond just exposition and trying to tell you what's going on and trying to set things up to either go wrong or go right in the last half of the story. And yeah, no, this time actually the Ark in Space first half is actually very entertaining. I'd actually say it's some of the best parts of the story. The last half obviously has some great stuff, but the first 2 episodes are actually really, really strong, genuinely enjoyable stuff. And yes, you know, we'll talk about practical effects towards the end, but a lot of the practical stuff with the Wirral, it happens more towards the last half of the story. So the first half, I'm kind of just enjoying it for what it is. But let's talk about the last half. The last half of the story, it has the main cast clambering through the ship all in different places to try and flush the Wirren out of the ship so the humans can survive and don't get, you know, taken over. It is actually very entertaining. The only criticism that I would have is that I'm more interested in the team dynamic. The story here didn't grab me enough as other stories have done. It was the same with Robot, which does obviously kind of worry me stepping forward. However, I've seen all of Season 12 now, and I know that trend doesn't continue, thankfully. But I think my point here is just, I enjoy the story, but the team dynamic interests me more. Seeing the Fourth Doctor, Sarah and Harry, and seeing characters and seeing how they act is a novelty that wears off quite quickly. So I'm kind of glad that this kind of stops here. I really enjoyed the story for Ark in Space, but I feel like, especially towards the second half, I felt more interested by the team dynamic. Some of the best bits came from the team dynamic and the characters, opposed to what's actually happening on this ship. I didn't really care much about the human characters. I didn't really care much about, you know, anything, the monsters. I didn't really care much about anything that was going on, really. It was more so about, oh, here's how the Fourth Doctor's acting in his second story. It's really interesting seeing how Tom Baker adapts to the role. Same with Sarah Jane Smith, same with Harry Sullivan. It was enjoyable, but maybe not for the right reasons for me. But I guess that's just my personal preference, no hard feelings. If you don't agree, I don't expect you to. Let's talk about characters. The Fourth Doctor's played by Tom Baker. As always, absolutely bloody brilliant. Genuinely just really enjoyable to watch on screen. Seeing him develop his incarnation of the Doctor in his second story and absolutely killing it. He needed to land this. He needed to have his first space adventure just land and work and be brilliant and enjoyable, and he bloody managed it. He really bloody managed it to Tom Baker, and I have props to him. He absolutely smashed it. Sarah Jane Smith, again, absolutely brilliant, strong, independent, one of the best companions, just basically Elizabeth Sladen on normal form, basically, just absolutely smashing it out the park, being a great companion, just being herself, and it worked. She was great in this story. Harry Sullivan, again, a joy to watch. Slightly annoying in places, it has to be said. It did begin to feel like he was starting to like sort of be like second fiddle. Now I know he doesn't last in the TARDIS anywhere near as long as Sarah Jane Smith, which is kind of odd. It's like a temporary companion when the main one has lasted like before this companion arrived and after. it does feel a little bit weird sometimes. However, like, he was fine. It just felt like sometimes he was more of a post just to spit questions at the Doctor. And because he doesn't understand the realms of space and all that sort of thing, even though he works for UNIT, it sort of did get to me a little bit where he's just like, he's constantly like asking questions, and it's like talking down to the Doctor, even though he knows he's wrong, because every time he gets proven wrong, he's like, oh, okay, guess I was wrong. But here I'm going to correct you on this. Oh, no, I'm wrong again. It's like, I like Harry Sullivan, but he's just not really one of my favourite companions, and it's really hard to kind of love him. He's fine, but I can see why he didn't last more than like one season. The Wirren, great villains actually. They dated horribly with the practical effects, absolutely terribly. Literally bubble wrap painted green. So, you know, at least Kablam did that better. I feel like the Wirren weren't bad though. I feel like besides the stupid practical effects taking me out the story totally, I have to look at it for its time, and for its time it was pretty good. Just not very intimidating now, and it just doesn't hold up very well. I think if they brought the Wirren back to Doctor Who, and they were to do it again in New Who, like totally remastering them, better CGI and practical effects, you know, a good mix, I think they could work. I think the premise and I think their motives, I think, are interesting. You could definitely do more with these characters, even if they appear in the background as a joke, just totally remastered and looking a lot better. It would be nice, you know what I mean? Like, I would have rather had the Wirren than the Absorbaloff. You know, it's one of those things, like, there's plenty of New Who villains that I go, oh, they're a bit crap. The Wirren were a bit crap, but it's one of the ones that I go, oh, yeah, especially since Ark in Space is a fan favourite story, I'd happily see these monsters back, just with better practical effects, please. Anyway, let's talk about the best bits, or bits if you saw the last video. Talking about the best bits of this story, the whole first episode was basically brilliant. I really enjoyed that. I didn't love robots, so going into this with the first episode being really refreshing, enjoyable, not edgy as seat, but almost there. Very enjoyable stuff, very engaging stuff. A lot of enjoyment to be had, I suppose. Another one of the best bits was Sarah in the tunnel. There was a segment towards, I think it was in episode 4, where Sarah has to sort of crawl through this tunnel. She gets really claustrophobic, she gets stuck, and the dynamic between her and the Fourth Doctor there is brilliant. The Fourth Doctor basically winds her up and says she's useless, she's going to cause everyone to die, and she gets so annoyed by that because of her character and how strong and independent she's supposed to be as a character, and is as a character. Sarah Jane is brilliant. She gets so wound up and angry by that she's like, right, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you, and actually pushed herself out the tunnel. And the message at the end of that was really lovely, and I really just enjoyed watching that scene because I knew exactly what the Doctor was doing, but it was just great to see that dynamic play out on screen and just be like, oh God, Tom Baker and Elizabeth Sladen just smashing it. It's brilliant. It's honestly so enjoyable to watch. The set design was also brilliant. The set design throughout this story was just really, like, really nice looking. We know it gets used later in Revenge of the Cybermen, so we'll talk a little bit more about it there, I suppose. But here, yeah, really good stuff. Obviously, it was quite expensive to build, hence why they used it in 2 stories, or maybe they just ran out of budget after this. But it looked nice. There was a lot of different rooms, a lot of different areas. It felt very open. It felt like a proper spaceship. It felt like a proper sort of space station. It didn't feel massive. It never felt anywhere near as big as maybe they wanted it to feel, but it worked. And considering looking at the Wirren and the practical effects they used there, I have to absolutely praise the phenomenal set design in this story. Another thing was the ending. I really like how this series flows from one episode to the next. Robot leads right into this. This leads right into the Sontaran experiment. And, you know, I've seen the rest of the season, so I know it keeps going like that. It's just exciting to see. I like the fact that this episode, well, episode 4 ended leading directly into Sontaran experiment. It was just enjoyable, and it just bridges it together. I like a series arc. And when I didn't know Classic Who did this with seasons. Well, you know, not all seasons, obviously, but with this specific season, it's a really nice idea that works just really well, in my opinion. I really enjoyed it. Anyway, that's that for the Ark in Space. There's not too much to talk about, and I'm afraid that is basically all I really want to say. It's not too big of a story for me. Like, I enjoyed it. It's there. It's up there. It's definitely great. It was good. There's nothing really too much else to say about the Ark in Space. It's just there. It's good stuff. I've said the bits I liked, I've said the bits that I wasn't so keen on, and why I didn't connect too well with this overall story. I guess it's kind of towards the latter part, the overall story is somewhat forgettable, but it's definitely one of the more rewatchable stories, so I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think it works, but it's not my favourite of all time, so I think I'm going to have to give it probably around a 7 out of 10. What do you think of the Ark in Space? That's just my opinion, obviously. If you want to leave your opinion in the comments below, I'd happily read them. Would love to know what you guys think. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment below for any more suggestions in the future, subscribe with notifications on if you haven't already, because YouTube is a bit of a mess. We're heading directly towards 17k now. Well, we're trying at least. I've got a Patreon page if you want to support me on there and get early access content, as well as access to an exclusive Discord server and all that sort of lovely stuff. It's all available there. I've also got a Twitter, Instagram, and a secret project that we're revealing very soon, all of which are linked in the description, especially that secret project. You should definitely check that out. Link in the description. Anyway, that's it from me. I hope you all have a lovely day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.